Good morning, everyone. Good morning and happy Mother's Day to everybody. So happy that you joined us this morning. I am the Reverend William Levwood, affectionately known as Rev Lev. My pronouns are he and him. As we begin our service, I remind you to silence your phones if you're with us in person. And whether you're in person or joining us online, to take a deep breath as we center ourselves for worship. We open and welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land who live on in their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomic Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing so that all together shall one day know full justice.
Welcome to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. I am Ren Colley, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm happy to be your worship associate today. This congregation is a welcoming and inclusive spiritual home where we inspire each other to live our values. Together, we care in community, grow in spirit, and act for justice. Whether you are a longtime member or a newcomer, or something in between, we are so delighted that you decided to join us today. Welcome.
I invite you now to rise and join in reciting our chalice lighting words. The words will be on the screen, but also you should see these bookmarks in your hymnals, and it's a little tricky, you gotta read the red and then flip and read the rest of the red, and then do the orange and then flip and read the rest of the orange. But those are there for you if you would like to use them, and the words will also be on the screen. Actually, the first things we say are not on the bookmark. So if you'll rise in body or in spirit, and let us say together, love is at the center of Unitarian Universalism. Love is the practice of our living tradition. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant to help everyone flourish by building accessible and inclusive communities, honor the web of life by protecting Earth and all beings, be beloved community by dismantling racism and all oppressions, cultivate generosity by sharing our faith, presence, and resources, celebrate diversity by embracing our differences with love and respect. Transform the world with love by growing together spiritually and ethically. So throughout this year, we've been exploring these proposed UU values that will be voted at our Unitarian Universalist Association's General Assembly this summer. And if 2/3 of the delegates vote to approve them, these will become our new UU values. They are structured in 3 lines. You have on these bookmarks 2 of the lines. The first line gives you a basic definition. I think of it as the why of the value. So it gives you the basic definition of each of the values. And something that's special about these values, we've had for 40 years now 7 principles. And it was pointed out at some point that people could sign on to those 7 principles without actually doing much, without actually actively doing much. They had a preamble that said, we affirm and promote, and those are only 2 verbs. And then you read the 7 principles and there's no verbs. So this second line of the values tells us how we do what we've committed to doing, what we're committing to do to make that true. It's preceded by the words, we covenant to. And then the third line I think of as how we go about, like the underlying way that we do that, what spirit we bring to the doing of those things. We say in this new proposed covenant and values that love is at the center of Unitarian Universalism, and that we are accountable to each other through the spiritual discipline of love. So I think that third line tells us about what that spiritual discipline of love looks like. It looks like relationships of mutuality and interdependence, relationships of care and justice. It looks like using inclusive democratic processes in how we run our congregations, how we run our association, and supporting the use of inclusive democratic processes in the world at large, beyond our congregations. And actually, I went ahead and put the third line of pluralism, which is our theme for this month, the value of pluralism. I put that third line on here, not the second line. So if we're going to celebrate diversity through the value of pluralism, we need to embrace our differences with love and respect. So that's what we're going to explore today. There's actually an important part to pluralism that isn't on this bookmark at all, because this is an abbreviation, but I think it's so crucial. In our 7 principles, the first one is that we affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Now, I love the meaning behind that, but I have long wished for, had a longing for, a more poetic language that would capture it. I've done a lot in my life in Jewish community and Jewish practices, and in Jewish community, that similar sentiment is expressed through the idea B'Tselem Elohim, that the human being is created in the image of God. And I feel like that has more poetry to it. But in our pluralistic UU faith, where we embrace multiple theologies, that language isn't going to work. So we have this proposed new language of pluralism that says, we celebrate that we are all sacred beings. We are all sacred beings. That's what we're going to explore today. It continues. It says, we celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theologies. But just that part, we celebrate that we are all sacred beings. I think if we take a moment and look around, look at the children over here with the ribbons, look at the other people around, and imagine really celebrating, starting from a place of celebrating that each and every person is a sacred being.
So this morning, our Time for All Ages is a classic story that has touched the hearts of millions worldwide. Love You Forever, written by Robert Munsch and illustrated by Sheila McGraw. Since publication in 1986, Love You Forever has sold more than 30 million copies in paperback and the regular hardcover edition, as well as hundreds of thousands of copies in Spanish and French. Love You Forever by Robert Munsch and illustrated by Sheila McGraw. A mother held her new baby and very slowly rocked him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while she held him, she sang,
I'll be loving you forever. I'll be liking you for always. As long as I am living, my babe you'll be. I'll be loving you forever. I'll be liking you for always. As long as I am living, my babe you'll be.
The baby grew. He grew and he grew and he grew. He grew until he was 2 years old, and he ran all around the house. He pulled all the books off the shelves. He pulled all the food out of the refrigerator and took his mother's watch and flushed it down the toilet. Sometimes his mother would say, "This kid is driving me crazy." But at nighttime, when that 2-year-old was quiet, she opened the door to his room, crawled across the floor, looked up over the side of his bed, and if he was really asleep, she picked him up and rocked him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. While she rocked him, she sang,
"I'll be loving you forever. I'll be liking you for always. As long as I am living, my babe you'll be. I'll be loving you forever. I'll be liking you for always. As long as I am living, my babe you'll be."
The little boy grew. He grew and he grew and he grew. He grew until he was 9 years old, and he never wanted to come in for dinner. He never wanted to take a bath. And when Grandma visited, he always said bad words. Sometimes his mother wanted to sell him to the zoo. But at nighttime, when he was asleep, the mother quietly opened the door to his room, crawled across the floor, and looked up over the side of the bed. If he was really asleep, she picked up that 9-year-old boy and rocked him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while she rocked him, she sang,
"I'll be loving you forever. I'll be liking you for always. As long as I am living, my babe you'll be. I'll be loving you forever. I'll be liking you for always. As long as I am living, my babe you'll be."
The boy grew. He grew and he grew and he grew. He grew until he was a teenager. He had strange friends, and he wore strange clothes, and he listened to strange music. Sometimes his mother felt like she was in a zoo. But at nighttime, when that teenager was asleep, the mother opened the door to his room, crawled across the floor, and looked up over the side of the bed. If he was really asleep, she picked up that great big boy and rocked him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. While she rocked him, she sang,
"I'll be loving you forever. I'll be liking you for always. As long as I am living, my babe you'll be. I'll be loving you forever. I'll be liking you for always. For as long as I am living, my babe you'll be."
That teenager grew. He grew and he grew and he grew. He grew until he was a grown-up man. He left home and got a house across town. But sometimes on dark nights, the mother got in her car and drove across town. If all the lights in her son's house were out, she opened his window, crawled across the floor, and looked up over the side of the bed. If that great big man was really asleep, she picked him up and rocked him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while she rocked him, she sang,
"I'll be loving you forever. I'll be liking you for always. As long as I am living, my babe you'll be. I'll be loving you forever. I'll be liking you for always. As long as I am living, my babe you'll be.
Well, that mother, she got older. She got older and older and older. One day she called up her son and said, "You'd better come to see me because I'm very old and sick." So her son came to see her. When he came in the door, she tried to sing the song. She sang,
I'll be loving you forever. I'll be liking you for always.
but she couldn't finish because she was too old and sick. The son went to his mother. He picked her up and rocked her back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And he sang this song.
I'll be loving you forever. I'll be liking you for always. For as long as I am living, my mom you'll be. I'll be loving you forever. I'll be liking you for always. For as long as I am living, my mom you'll be.
When the son came home that night, he stood for a long time at the top of the stairs. Then he went into the room where his very new baby daughter was sleeping. He picked her up in his arms and very slowly rocked her back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while he rocked her, he sang,
I'll be loving you forever. I'll be liking you for always. For as long as I am living, my babe you'll be. I'll be loving you forever. I'll be liking you for always. For as long as I am living, my babe you'll be.
I sometimes think of religion as the greatest hits of a particular culture's art. And if that's the case, in some ways this book that we just read should be entered into the canon. And as Unitarian Universalists, we do draw from multiple sources, and we can make non-religious sources part of our canon. I noticed that, children were looking at their parents with mischievous eyes during some parts of the story. I noticed that people were tearing up. I know that some of us probably wish we had a mother who was as attentive and loving as the one in the story. And others of us wish we had a mother who didn't sneak into our house when we were an adult and continue rocking us. We honor the diversity of all these experiences today on Mother's Day. And one more thing, I just want to point out, did anybody notice the melody of that song? Anybody, is that familiar? In case you didn't notice, that is one of the songs in the hymnal that I don't particularly like. And I shared that a couple weeks ago. But nonetheless, in the name of pluralism, because we celebrate that we are sacred beings, diverse in what hymns we like and don't like, I programmed that song into services for those of you who love it, and Brad and I decided that we would set the words of the song from this story to the melody of How Could Anyone Ever Tell You? So that's in the name of pluralism, which is our theme this month. So with that, I invite you to sing our children. Please remain seated and sing our children to their spiritual development class this morning.
These words are from Carl Rogers. People are just as wonderful as sunsets, if I can let them be. In fact, perhaps the reason we can truly appreciate a sunset is that we cannot control it. When I look at a sunset, as I did the other evening, I didn't find myself saying, "Soften the orange a little on the right-hand corner," and put a bit more purple along the base and use a bit more pink to color in the cloud color. I don't do that. I don't try to control a sunset. I watch with awe as it unfolds. I like myself best when I can appreciate my staff member, my son, my daughter, my grandchildren in this same way.
I know there are some people who look at the sunset and do say, don't you think it'd be beautiful if it had just a little bit more? This Thursday, my spouse, who's here this morning for Mother's Day and who often doesn't get to join us because she works as a chaplain at the hospital, she was off on Thursday because she did an overnight shift Thursday night, and she went on a hike, and I got a phone call, and I heard her voice in hushed tones say, I just saw the biggest great blue heron I have ever seen. In hushed tones, she said, I was hiking and I came upon it. I startled it actually, and I watched as it flew out with its huge wingspan across the water. And I was just struck with the sacredness of the moment and how she was honoring that great blue heron as a sacred being, and how that experience of sacredness made her want to share it with someone else. This weekend, our family went to Baltimore. My wife's brother is in the national tour of Clue, the play. So we went to see him in Baltimore. And in the daytime, we saw the show last evening, but in the daytime we went to the National Aquarium. And we saw sharks and fish of so many sizes and colors, bright colors. We saw fish with odd shapes, kind of bumpy, with like kind of pug-nosed, ugly faces that nonetheless were sacred. We saw a stingray, this black stingray. It was kind of like a black dog, but not really. It was maybe more like the inverse of an albatross. It was black, but with just little bit of white, and the way that it moved through the water, and it was at the bottom, so as you went up and around through all the different exhibits, you continued to have opportunities to look down and see the stingray along with the other sharks and fishes. There was an octopus. It was missing some of its tentacles, so it was like actually a heptopus or maybe a sextopus or I don't know how to say 5. Some people know. There was a rainforest section, so there are even animals that weren't sea creatures. There were puffins that we got to see swim in the water. We saw, that wasn't in the rainforest section actually, but in the rainforest section there was a sloth. There was a multicolored parrot that was squawking so loud that it'd make you jump. There were 2 ibis that you could catch a glimpse of with their peachy pink colors and their long, thin beaks. There was an observation area for the harbor that was advertised as a place where you could take a break. So we went there to kind of take a break from, it was crowded. There were so many people, lots of families, lots of people with little babies in their arms or attached in baby carriers. So we went to this observation area, and I started to look at the people as if they were fishes or sharks. Notice the tattoo this woman had that said resilient in red on her neck. The bright colored tennis shoes. The couple with the woman wearing high heels and a fancy white dress looking out at the harbor. adults who were surprisingly small and adults who were surprisingly tall and big, as well as children, all the different skin tones and colors of their clothing. When I was looking at the ibis, there was a group of 3 young women who were taking pictures with the parrot that was across on the other side, and I couldn't help but notice that one of the young women's kind of reddish, pinkish complexion was similar to the ibis. I had this experience of seeing the people as sacred beings and just being able to celebrate them the way that I celebrated the sharks and the fishes. But I didn't wish for the fishes to be a different color or a different shape, and I didn't do that with the people either. One of my favorite books is by a Maori author. The Maori are the indigenous people of New Zealand. A Maori author named Patricia Grace. And there's many reasons to love this book. It's called Potiki. It's about a community, a Maori community living off the land in their traditional ways. And then some developers come and they want to buy the land. And the people don't want to sell, and the developers say, but we'll bring jobs and progress and money, and you don't want to deny this to all the other people who could enjoy this coastline. And the Maori people resist, and they keep their land. But there's that interesting interaction where the 2 cultures are not able to understand each other. They're really missing each other. But I don't think this is the reason I love the book. I love the book from the very first pages when the character who is the mother describes her children. She describes her son, James. She says, he is like his father, patient and steady. She says that's how his birth was, even though he was the first. She describes her daughter 1 year younger than that first son, Tangi Moana, and how she is sharp as the rocks that jut out from the coast, and how that's what her birth was like. She describes her son Manu, who's cautious and fearful, sharing how she didn't remember his birth at all. They also have a 4th child that's not their biological child, their youngest, that they take care of. The reason that I love this book so much is really that first description where she is celebrating each person for their unique, wonderful quality. She isn't saying that Tangi Moana should be patient like her brother James, or James should be fierce like her, or passing judgment on Manu for being so fearful and cautious. She is celebrating each person, seeing them as a sacred being. Now you might think, especially on Mother's Day, you might think that this is the special gift that mothers are able to give. But I want to take you back to the aquarium for a moment. They also had a dolphin exhibit, or they had a place where you could see dolphins, and they told a story. They had a pod of 6 dolphins, and 5 of them were born in the aquarium, but 1 they'd gotten from another aquarium. And they talked about how that 1 dolphin was not getting along with the dolphins at this other aquarium. I got the sense that maybe it was a bigger pod there and they needed a little less stimulation, a more quiet, so they moved that dolphin to the National Aquarium in Baltimore. And they noticed that when she arrived, her behavior seemed a little bit off. She wasn't eating as much, she wasn't socializing with the other dolphins, and they realized eventually that she was pregnant. that she had come to the aquarium pregnant, and neither aquarium had known that. So she gave birth, and the person sharing this with us pointed out, he said that dolphins don't have a maternal instinct. They don't naturally know how to care for their young, but rather they are tutored in that bonding and nurturing by the other dolphins in their community who show them how to care. So this mother was having trouble bonding with her newborn infant. But the other dolphins, particularly the other female dolphins, dolphin culture is matriarchal, helped her out. They noticed what was happening and they schooled her in the ways of bonding and nurture. So it turns out that human beings are not so different in some ways from dolphins. You may have heard about the maternal instinct, but new research shows that there's no such thing as a maternal instinct. That in fact, humans, just like dolphins, learn how to bond, learn how to nurture their young, and then nurture each other throughout life by learning how to do that from their community. And sometimes it's hard, right? We know that there's postnatal depression that some mothers suffer from, and that sometimes you need help, just like the dolphin mom needed help. So it occurs to me, we say that we covenant, that we are committed to celebrating that we are all sacred beings. And yet it occurs to me that our society doesn't necessarily, in many ways, doesn't do such a good job of teaching us, of guiding us in how to bond with each other and how to nurture each other. That in fact, we put forth a lot of hierarchies, and we talked about this back in February when we talked about Audre Lorde's essay and the quote that you cannot dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. We talked about how the master's tools, as described in that essay, are to take differences and use them to create hierarchies, rather than to celebrate those differences as gifts of our collective diversity. So when we do that, we are teaching ourselves exactly the wrong thing, in my opinion, about how to bond with each other and how to nurture each other. That tendency to put differences in hierarchies causes us to say, oh, that child should be behaving more like this. That adult should be behaving more like this. That culture should be more like this other culture. This is true in how psychology has been studied. So in the mid-1970s, Carol Gilligan published the book A Different Voice. Carol Gilligan had noticed that in the psychological study of moral development, all the subjects were male. And all the main players, Piaget, Erik Erikson, Lawrence Kohlberg, were also men. And that they had put forth a certain stages of moral development based in abstract principles, and that then women would be judged morally inferior because they were often using an entirely different set of standards to make moral decisions. So Carol Gilligan started studying women to find out what those stages were, what that ethic was about. And what she found was an ethic of care, an ethic that made affectionate bonds, and an ethic that was committed to not doing harm. See, in that moral development based on abstract principles, you could follow the abstract principle of fairness and do a lot of harm and be named more moral than the person who is making choices that would cause less harm. But in this new model, with harm at the center, there's a description of one woman that she studied who said, there are no moral absolutes when your guiding light is to not do harm, because it's different in each situation. What is going to keep you from doing harm? What is going to help the other person in their mutual flourishing? Now, I just want to point out that initially, Carol Gilligan, she still set up this new standard in hierarchical stages, right? She was still somewhat caught in that old paradigm that difference creates hierarchies, that's what we do with that. It took her about 20 years to really fully embrace a more open experience of moral development and diversity. So I think that if we're going to be pluralistic, if we're really going to make our congregations and our society multicultural, multiracial, multigenerational, and pluralistic in that sense where we really celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theologies, and in so many other ways, we need new practices. We need new tools. So I want to take us just one more time back to the aquarium. There was another wonderful feature about the dolphins. There was no dolphin show. They didn't teach them tricks that then they would perform for us. But instead, we just got to watch them being dolphins, swimming around. So if they, which they did, if they crested just gently above the water in a duet together, it wasn't because they were performing for us, it was just because they wanted to do that. If you watched one upside down and the other right side up swimming along together, it's just because they wanted to. When the tail came up and the dolphin did a handstand, I don't know what else to call it. It was just because that dolphin wanted to do that in that moment. And it reminded me of this dance practice, this dance therapy practice. My spouse and I met as modern dancers, so we both got to practice what's known as authentic movement. In authentic movement, you have a mover and a witness, and the mover closes their eyes and waits for an impulse to move to arise. There's something about first closing the eyes that takes away all that desire to perform, to make your body pretty or beautiful, your movements pretty or beautiful. And then there's that instruction to wait for the impulse to arise. Sometimes a lot of emotion enters the room. People are stomping, growling. It's also surprising how many people just lie down and take a nap, right? When they key in and to the impulse their body is telling them, it says, you need some rest. Or maybe they go over to the wall and they become fascinated by the texture of the wall. The other part of authentic movement is that there's a witness. And the witness, their role is to create a non-judgmental space to hold the mover. The mover, who, remember, has eyes closed, can't even see them, but can feel that holding space that the witness is providing. And in some ways, I found that experience of learning to be a witness even more profound than being told that I could just be and didn't have to perform and I could listen to the impulse. It helped me do what the aquarium helped me do. It helped me to see people as sacred beings. All of a sudden, the most everyday actions were just so incredibly beautiful and sacred. There's another part of authentic movement where after you have a round where a person moves and another person witnesses, or it can be done in groups, then they share about the experience. And there's two important things to learn from that practice of the sharing round as well. So first, the mover speaks first. So they start with honoring the experience of the mover. And then the witness speaks about their experience of witnessing, but the witnessed is told that they're supposed to just share what they observed, not their interpretations of what they observed. So you saw somebody going like this, you don't say, when I saw you cradling that baby. You say, when I saw your arms together in that arc, rocking back and forth, I felt a sense of calm. You see how important that is, how much it honors the experience, the sacred otherness of the mover in that witnessing? So I offer that as an initial practice to witness other people in this way, to also open yourself to that sacred beingness. I did that this morning. I often don't eat breakfast before service. I plan to do it, and then I get here, and then I'm rushing around with other stuff. But today I sat outside on a bench, and I ate my breakfast because I wanted to honor myself as a sacred being, not a sacred doing. Right? So we can be the mover and honor our sacredness. That way we can practice being the witness, honoring other people. And I find that this changes everything. And one example of how it changes everything is what it does to adjectives. All of a sudden, they become what they're meant to be, which is descriptive, not judging. You say that a thing is short or long. You say that a thing is rough or smooth, sweet or bitter, just as a description. Tangi Moana was sharp. It's just a description. We're not saying it's good that she was sharp. We're not saying it's bad that she was sharp. James was steady and patient. We're not saying it's good that he was steady and patient. We're not saying it's bad. We're just witnessing the sacred being before us. So I invite us into this practice, like Carl Rogers said, to look at the world the way that we look at a sunset, to not say that the great blue heron should be a blue whale, that an eagle should be a mouse. I invite us to do that with people, which I think is so much more challenging, and to do it with diverse cultures, which is so much more challenging. We're so trained to think that this is quality, and if it doesn't conform to whatever that is, then it's deficient, it's inferior, rather than asking, why is it that way? What purpose is being served by that choice that's being made? I'll share one more story from my life. When I was a modern dancer, I used to wear all this wild flowing pants and tops that I'd get at thrift stores. And the colors, I guess you could say they didn't match. And there might be two patterns that didn't match. But I had an artist friend, a visual artist, and one day he celebrated my sacred beingness by saying, I'm just curious, do you just grab whatever and just throw it on? Or do you actually think that what you're wearing goes together? But he said it in the most genuine way, and I said, no, I actually chose these. I actually like these together. And he said, that is awesome. It was clear he could not understand the logic I was using, right? But as a visual artist, he was so intrigued. He was like, what is William seeing? Right? What if we did that with each other? When people made choices we didn't understand, we said, are you doing that for a reason? Because probably they are, right? Probably they are. So I invite you into that, into this practice of being witnesses, sacred witnesses of sacred beings in all our glorious diversity, our diversity of culture and experience and theology. I invite us into practicing celebrating diversity, practicing seeing and celebrating every being as a sacred being. May it be so, and may we be among those who make it so.